Transparency is the cornerstone of accountability, and accountability is the foundation of good governance. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Naomi Wrightson, and I'm the Program Administrator at the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, or CAPRI. For those who may not be familiar, CAPRI is an independent think tank devoted to evidence-based research towards improved public policymaking in Jamaica and the Caribbean. Today's event will present the findings of the 2023 Open Budget Survey, OBS, for Jamaica. This report assesses the openness of the government's budget process, specifically examining how comprehensively the government provides public access to budget information, encourages public participation in the budget process, and allows for scrutiny of the budget's outcomes. We are grateful to International Budget Partnership, IBP, for their support, which made this research possible. After my remarks, we will hear from Alexandra Ciconello of the IBP, followed by the presentation of the report, Budget Scorecard 2024, by CAPRI researcher Morgan Phillips. After that, there will be a panel discussion moderated by Dr. Damian King, Executive Director of CAPRI. Our panelists will include Chevelle Cornwall, researcher on this report, and Janet Calder from the Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, otherwise known as JAMP. Want to know how you can participate in the discussion? We'll be using Slido, which is the ultimate Q&A and polling platform for live and virtual meetings and events. It's easy to use and very interactive. First, you'll need to open a browser on your device and type in slido.com. You'll be asked to enter an event code. To keep it simple, our event code is CAPRI. Once you've entered the code, you'll be able to send in your questions, upvote the questions of others, and participate in live polls. We recommend stating your name and location, but this is not required. Now you're welcome to engage with us throughout this event. Thank you for your participation, and we look forward to your questions. With that, let me now introduce Alexandra Ciconello from the International Budget Partnership to share his remarks.
Hello, my name is Alexandra Ciconello. On behalf of International Budget Partnership, IBP, I say welcome to all of you today. I'd like to thank CAPRI, our partner in Jamaica, to organize such a great event. IBP is an international organization based in Washington, D.C., with country offices in Senegal, Nigeria, South Africa, and Indonesia. Our mission is to collaborate with civil society organizations, social movements, and community organizers across different countries to advance public budget systems that work for all people. It is my pleasure to say a few words of introductions to this great event in Kingston around the results and recommendations of the OBS, the Open Budget Survey 2023. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be with you in person this time, but soon I will be in Jamaica. The Open Budget Survey, or OBS, is the world's only comparative, independent, and regular assessment of participation, oversight, and transparency in national budgets. The Open Budget Survey research process embodies the spirit and values of our worldwide network of open budget champions. It is locally led and massive collective undertaken by local think tanks as CAPRI and other CSOs, peer reviewers, and government reviewers. The latest round is our biggest one. We had 125 countries part of the last round of the survey. This is the 9th edition of the OBS that started in 2006. Jamaica has been included in the survey in 2018. I'd like to just say a few words about the global result of the OBS. And across the different pillars that OBS affects, that transparency, participation, and oversight, we find a mix of performance. The global average for transparency, public participation, and oversight are at similar levels that we've seen in past rounds. There has been slow but incremental improvements globally on transparency, though it is still far below what we would consider sufficient in terms of good practices around budget transparency. There is progress on public participation, though it is still the weakest area. Rurally, legislative oversight has steadily declined over the last two surveys round, falling 3 points from its pre-pandemic mark. We observed during the pandemic like less oversight because of the urgent spending that the government was needed to conduct, and this pattern is still not returned to previous levels before pandemic. To spend money, governments need money, and they get it by raising tax or non-tax revenue or by borrowing money. And the budget is the vehicle through which those decisions are made. Our survey finds most countries fall short on providing critical information around debt and taxes. This global overview and results are just an introduction to the fruitful debate you are about to have now on the opportunities and challenges for advancing budget accountability in Jamaica. I wish you all a great discussion.
I'll now hand over to our researcher, Morgan Phillips.
Thank you, Naomi. My name is Morgan Phillips, and today I'll be presenting Budget Scorecard 2024, Transparency, Participation, and Oversight in the Government's Budget Process. The significance of the budget is more than the amount of funds available. It is the governance of this budget that influences the economy, public health, social services, and the livelihoods of citizens. Having an open budget is the key to upholding values of trust, accountability, and meaningful citizen engagement. This is especially important considering that the national budget is funded by taxpayer dollars and managed by elected representatives. As citizens, we have a right to be informed and participate in decision-making about the budget. So today we'll be looking at Budget Scorecard 2024, which is an assessment of the Government of Jamaica's performance according to the International Budget Partnership's Open Budget Survey. We'll be going through the 3 criteria of openness, transparency, participation, and oversight, along with recommendations for improving Jamaica's scores. The Open Budget Survey is the world's only independent and objective research instrument for this purpose. Its methodology consists of 142 scored and peer-reviewed questions that are comparable across 125 countries. Transparency measures how comprehensively and timely the government provides public access to budget information. Participation measures how well the government facilitates public engagement throughout the budget process. And oversight measures the effectiveness of independent, publicly accessible assessments of the government's adherence to proper expenditure procedures. Jamaica participated in the Open Budget Survey for the first time in 2019 and again in 2021. In our 3rd installment of this assessment, we're covering the 2022-23 fiscal year and comparing it to the performance of past years as well as to the 124 other countries who participated in the survey. So let's look at how Jamaica did in each of the 3 categories, starting with transparency. For transparency, there are 8 essential budget documents reviewed for availability, timeliness, and comprehensiveness. 7 of the 8 budget documents were available. The exception was the pre-budget statement, which was not and has never been published by the Jamaican government. 7 of the 8 budget documents were also published in a timely manner. However, only 2 of the 7 available documents received sufficient scores for their content. Those were the budget proposal and in-year report, which is the central government operations table, the citizens' budget, the mid-year review, which is the fiscal policy paper interim report, and the audit report had limited content. The enacted budget, which is the Appropriations Act, and the year-end report, which is the fiscal policy paper, had insufficient content. Jamaica's transparency score of 50 out of a maximum 100 is the same as it was in 2021. And while this is 5 points above the global average, it is below the benchmark of 61 designated as sufficient by the Open Budget Survey. It's below the average score of our neighbors in the Caribbean and Latin American region, and it's below the OECD developed country average to which we should aspire. We've come up with the following recommendations for increasing Jamaica's transparency score to a sufficient level and for the first time in 2 years. We can start by publishing a pre-budget statement so that we have all 8 of the essential budget documents. We should make the enacted budget, mid-year review, and year-end report more comprehensive. And this can be done by presenting the details of expenditure and revenue in the case of the year-end report, disaggregated by all 3 types of classifications. So administrative classifications, identifying who is responsible for spending the allocated funds, which government ministry, department, or agency. Economic classifications, specifying what the money is being spent on, such as salaries, goods, or services, and functional classifications, detailing the purpose of the spending, such as healthcare, education, or infrastructure. We recommend establishing a pre-publication consultation mechanism for the citizens' budget so that information can be produced according to the public's requests. Now, we'll move on to participation, which is related to transparency because the government has to provide the public with timely and accurate budget information to allow for meaningful participation. Participatory budgeting is valuable because it enhances government responsiveness, effectiveness, and equity of resource allocation. There are 4 stages of the budget process where the public may be invited to participate: formulation, approval, implementation, and auditing. With a score of 0, we can determine that citizens are excluded from participating in the formulation stage of the budget process. There are limited opportunities for participation in the approval and implementation stages, and the auditing stage is where Jamaica scored the most points for participation. In the approval stage, the public may observe the budget hearing proceedings, which are televised live and on Jamaica's Public Broadcasting Commission's YouTube channel. Members of the public can watch and comment virtually, but they are not allowed to participate by raising concerns or suggesting changes. Citizen input is not accepted by the Standing Finance Committee of the House of Representatives during budget discussions, and this is why the score for approval is limited to 11 out of 100. In the implementation stage, there are 6 topics recommended by the Open Budget Survey for citizen engagement. The Jamaican government engages its citizens in 2 of the 6. The Jamaica Investment Map engages citizens in the implementation of public investment projects. The Constituency Development Fund program engages citizens in the implementation of social spending. There are no formal or structured processes in place to engage citizens in changes in macroeconomic circumstances, delivery of public services, collection of revenue, or changes in deficit and debt levels. This is why the score for implementation is limited to 17 out of 100. Jamaica's score of 67 in the auditing stage is the only sufficient score for participation in any stage of the budget process. This is largely due to the Auditor General's Department, which facilitates citizen input on topics for inclusion in its audit program through an online submission portal, focus groups, and anonymous letters. Jamaica's participation score of 18 is consistent with the insufficient scores of the previous assessment, although that score was an improvement on our 2019 score. Jamaica's score is average when compared to those of our neighbors in the Caribbean and Latin American region, and actually 3 points above the global average, but remains below the developed countries' average. And so our recommendations for increasing participation are to facilitate participation in the formulation stage of the budget by setting up a submissions portal on the Ministry of Finance and Public Services website to collect feedback on a pre-budget statement and the overall budget process. Citizen input should inform the budget proposal, and this could be facilitated by changing the current process where the budget proposal is created, debated, and revised by the legislature before enactment to a more participatory approach, which allows for citizen input to inform the debate about how the proposal should be formed and allowing citizens to not just observe, but also provide feedback to the Standing Finance Committee of Parliament during discussions before the budget is enacted. We recommend expanding the Jamaica investment map beyond capital expenditures to enable citizens to track operational costs and debt repayments. And we also recommend summarizing how citizen feedback is used in the auditing process by outlining how the issues raised by the public were addressed and the outcomes of any subsequent interventions. The final category of openness is oversight. Jamaica's budget oversight score is calculated by combining the weighted contributions of its audit and legislative oversight scores. There are two operational oversight institutions. Audit oversight in Jamaica is the responsibility of the Auditor General's Department, which is the supreme audit institution responsible for assessing the effectiveness and compliance of Jamaica's financial management systems. Legislative oversight in Jamaica is the responsibility of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, a parliamentary body composed of government and opposition representatives. The audit oversight score is 56, which is the same as the last assessment score, below a sufficient score, below the global average, below the Latin American and Caribbean regional average, and below the developed countries average. The legislative oversight score is 53, which represents a 3-point increase from the last assessment. And this is comparable to the Latin American and Caribbean regional average and above the global average, but this still falls in the insufficient category and is below the developed countries average. Based on the assessments of both audit and legislative oversight, Jamaica's aggregated budget oversight score is 54. This is equal to the global average, but has only improved 2 points since 2019. This is below the average of our neighbors in the Caribbean and Latin American region and far below the developed countries average. There is potential for Jamaica's oversight framework to improve, since the Independent Fiscal Commission was established by the government in 2023 as an independent public fiscal oversight authority to monitor Jamaica's compliance with fiscal rules. Once operationalized, the Independent Fiscal Commission, in addition to the Auditor General's Department and the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, can offer strengthened budgetary oversight. Our recommendations for further strengthening oversight are to make the audit report more comprehensive by advising the public on the actions required to address the Auditor General's Department's recommendations and the progress made by the government since the previous recommendations were issued for ongoing monitoring and evaluation. The Public Administration and Appropriations Committee needs to meet its benchmark requirements by reporting on the in-year reports of the central government operations tables at least 3 times during the budget year. We recommend promoting the Jamaica investment map through social media and other communications campaigns to encourage active engagement that will strengthen public oversight. Based on an average of its scores across the 3 categories of openness, Jamaica earned an overall insufficient score of 41. This ranks Jamaica 55th out of the 125 countries assessed in the 2023 Open Budget Survey. This is above the majority of countries, but considering that our transparency and participation scores have stagnated since the last assessment in 2021, and our oversight score has only seen a 2-point improvement since 2019, the government should step up their efforts towards openness. Budgets are an annual opportunity to reinvigorate the social contract and public trust. Now that we have this data on our current performance, we can advocate for the government to do better with the next budget and maximize this opportunity to demonstrate accountability.
The Caribbean Policy Research Institute, CAPRI, is a public policy think tank. And that means that we are a research organization that we examine what are the issues that are facing the country, economic issues, social issues, environmental issues, governance issues, and we look at what are the causes of the problems, and we suggest solutions. In this instance, we're looking at the budget process. This is CAPRI's third installment of this analysis of the budget process. And we're going to have a discussion about it. To have that discussion, I have with us on the panel, Chevelle Cornwall, who is one of the lead researchers on this exercise and a researcher at CAPRI along with being our document specialist. And I also have Jeanette Calder, who is the executive director of the Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, JAMP. Before we get to the discussion, I would like you to log into slido.com, and on Slido, that is your opportunity to participate in the Q&A. You're allowed to post questions on Slido that the panelists are going to address. And you're also, even if you don't have a question of your own, you can see the questions that are posted by other persons, and you can upvote the question that you think is most important, and that will bring it to our attention. Also, we have posted 2 poll questions on Slido that we'd like to get your opinion on. So please go on to slido.com, put in the event code CAPRI, and answer the poll questions, and we'll post the results later on in the discussion. Chevelle, there's a lot of discussion about the budget. Mm-hmm. When the budget is presented round about the end of the previous financial year and the start of the next financial year. This is March, April. Mm-hmm. And that's when everybody, including CAPRI, has something to say about the budget. We are not participating here in this budget scorecard exercise around that time. So just tell me, what is the difference between that analysis that takes place when the budget is promulgated and what we're doing now? What is the essential difference, and why are we doing it now?
So at that time, Damien, we're kind of breaking down the numbers, the figures that are involved in the budget, right? But at this time, we're looking at the process, and there are 4 stages in this process, which is the budget process. We have formulation, approval, implementation, and audit. So that is what we're dealing with this round. Zooming into the budget process and to see whether Jamaica has and their score in terms of the open budget survey as it relates to the process, and if their fiscal management has improved.
Excellent. So what I'm understanding is that even though CAPRI very often talks about actual policies and actual decisions, this is an instance where we're looking at basically how things work. Mm-hmm. You might want to say the institutional framework.
Yes.
Because a lot of a country's outcomes really depends upon the quality of its institutional framework and not really the actual policy decisions.
Yes.
So you've broken it down into 3 areas: transparency, participation, and oversight. There is a temptation, I know, mm-hmm. for people to pay attention to how much of the allocation goes to the Ministry of Education, how much goes to security. And we are here talking about what seems to be more esoteric, certainly more abstract mm-hmm. questions. Mm-hmm. So starting with you again, Chevelle, tell me, why is it transparency is important?
Transparency is important because the government are stewards of the people's money, taxpayer dollars. And so they must be able to say this is what we have done show what they have done with the taxpayers' money. And transparency in the case of the Open Budget Survey has three areas, and that is availability, comprehensiveness, and timeliness. And timeliness, Damian, the documents, the budget documents must be produced and must be available to the public within a certain time frame so that the public can have information enough to have a public debate about what they're seeing in terms of the budget documents. That's timeliness. Then we have another one of them is, so we have timeliness and we have comprehensiveness. So whatever is produced or given to the public to scrutinize must be full. It must be compact. Nothing should be left off. And it must also be available, free, without, and online, according to the OBS procedures.
As you say, it's people's money. So they have a right to be able to see transparently how it is used. So there's a reason, Janet, why I'm coming to you to explain the importance of the abstract concepts of participation and oversight.
Lovely. I like the first question and I like the second one because 5 years ago, Damon, I would have said yes, completely abstract and esoteric. But it might be sad, but if you wake me in the middle of the night and said to me, Jeanette, what is the thing that has the greatest impact on the quality of your life? 5 years ago, I would never have said the budget. Who would? But the truth of it is all of us sitting on the stage, the camera team that's here, the security guard I passed out there, everybody standing up outside at the major transport hub in Halfway Tree. Their lives are directly impacted by the budget of Jamaica. And I would even venture to say because we think the process is abstract and esoteric, I think we have fallen short in terms of how much more value Jamaica could get out of this budget process. What do I mean by that, Dee? If you'd asked me what was the budget process and if you want to get involved in it, I would have thought only of that segment that Chevelle spoke of, which is when we see them debating in the House. You said budget, that's what I think of. But Chevelle covered it. There are 4 stages to this budget process. It's the formulation and planning when the ministry begins to think about what does Jamaica need for the next 12 years. Then there's the debate and approval process. Then the third is the getting the money in and spending. And then the fourth is the monitoring and oversight. Now, my view is citizens should be involved in all 4, and none of them are abstract. At this point in time, our engagement, I would say, is limited to 2. When we think about the budget, we think about what we're going to pay the taxes because it's we, the government, getting the money from. I think a lot about citizen engagement at the last stage, which is monitoring and oversight. The money is mine, Chevelle said, and therefore I am concerned about not just the Auditor General looking, but citizens should also be able to have access to determine whether or not they're getting value for money. So I don't think of the process at all as esoteric, and it doesn't matter where in Jamaica you live, what school you go to, whether you are a one-employee organization or at the top of your game at Grace. The quality of our lives are impacted directly, Damon, by the quality of goods and services that we receive. And whether or not I'm driving an SUV or a 20-year-old car, if the street lighting is poor and I drop in a pothole on the way home, my axle broke, you know the quality of my day just shifted. So the point I'm really making is every day that I get up, when I think about the services that I have to utilize, whether at home, at play, or in the office, it ties right back into the budget. Any dream that I have, if I'm going to achieve it, it ties back into public services. So it's not abstract, it's not esoteric. It's easy for us to discuss the Auditor General in terms of its oversight. It's the government's auditor, making sure we get value for money, making sure that the laws about spending public money are honored. We sometimes think of the Auditor General as a scandal generator, but it's really there to make sure that the government is working efficiently. The Auditor General should really be a permanent secretary's best friend, really telling them how to do it best. However, I do want to tie together the 2 things you've mentioned there, the oversight and the public participation. Because JAM, for example, is demonstrating how citizens can get involved in oversight. A simple thing is you get Auditor General's reports that says something has gone awry, pick it up, just read the summary if you don't want to read the whole thing. And then what we do is tie it together with something that any citizen can do, Damien. We pick up a legislation called the Access to Information legislation, 22 years old. But every time I tell citizens of the power that this legislation have, their mouth falls open. What does it do for the citizen? It gives you the power to write any permanent secretary, any public official, and ask any question about governance, any question about spending money, anything you're satisfied or dissatisfied with, and say to a PSPS, what steps did you take to remedy this concern that the Auditor General's report spoke about? And people say, Ms. Calder, you can't really do that. I've been doing it for 5 years. So that is one formal way in which citizens can engage with the Auditor General using those reports. And another simple one is whistleblowing. Whistleblowing is on the increase. Anytime we hear the Auditor General speak about a special report, there are 5 kinds of reports. One of them is a special report. Every time you hear about the special report, it means that there's a whistleblower who tied into what the CAPRI colleague just said, using the portal, dropping an anonymous letter. All of that is citizens engaging in the oversight process. And last but by no means least is that the Auditor General also asks citizens who are utilizing the service, just tell us if it's good. Tell us if it's not working. We opened the papers today and we heard that the Bustamante Children's Hospital, for example, surgeries have been put back because of what? Theater, not in the condition for it. Citizens can get together and start to look at the oversight in that situation. Nothing is stopping them. And I'll close by saying this, Damien. When we think again, you said it a while ago about the budget process, we start to think about March, February, January. Today is when you begin to think about it, because it was in September when the government calls the ministry and say, tell me how much money you're gonna need. This is when citizens now need to start talking to the government, when they begin to plan and formulate. January, February, March, things have solidified, things get set, it's a little harder to change the game. So if you want to impact it, citizens need to understand the process, Damon. If they know when the process starts, that's when they can start talking to the government of Jamaica.
Your mention of the Access to Information Act reminds me of something that was said when it was actually passed. And somebody involved in the process said that the Access to the Information Act is like a muscle. If you don't exercise it, it atrophies. So it benefits from people actually, applying for it and using it and using the courts.
Yeah.
But I want to push you on the participation thing a bit.
Sure.
The budget it's complex. It involves a lot of deep analysis. It involves a bewildering array of numbers, very large numbers.
Yeah.
The ordinary citizen is going to say, what can I contribute to that? Why should I participate? I don't understand it.
Well, I like that, and I'll give you an example. I brought it because I wanted folks to see just how, I can build muscle. You talk about muscle. This is 700 pages, and you're right, Damien, this is not for the average citizen. And I just want to quickly say, which is why Jamaica's score has improved tremendously, because the government started to simplify it down to a citizen's budget, which makes it much easier for them to understand. However, the question slipped me.
Yes, no, I'm saying that the average citizen is going to look at that,
right,
and then say, I don't have the knowledge and the background and the training to be able to contribute to that.
Right.
So you give me access to participate, but then what can I offer?
So I'll give you an example of what I want citizens to get excited about it, because there's something in this budget for everybody, and everybody at home looking at this document I just picked up should be saying, what's in that for me? So it's important that they begin to learn how to read it. And Damon, I want to tell you, it looks complicated. It's not as complicated as it looks. You only need to learn how to read 3 pages, and after that, it becomes repetitive. So one of the things JAM does is try to simplify it for citizens. So I want to communicate that very clearly. It looks crazily like it's Greek, but anybody, if you're taught to do something, after that, it becomes easier. But outside of engaging the document itself, here's a practical example. Finance Committee was sitting in the House earlier this year. A citizen was driving past Vale Royal and took a picture because they thought it looked really shabby. They didn't just drive past and see the condition of this building that matters to them and just complain in the car. Loaded it up to social media, other citizens started to talk, and guess what happened next, Dr. King? A couple people of importance got tagged, and a discussion began. in the Standing Finance Committee, where a minister was able to make a commitment about how much they would be willing to put down to rehabilitate Vale Royale. That for me is a citizen getting involved in the budget process. So it depends on what the entry point is. Any citizen seeing a service that is not up to par, that raises their voice and hopefully contacts the people who can make a difference, or even just start talking to citizens, tagging Damien King, he'll respond, and people who follow Damien will see. So I don't want to let citizens think that you have to be able to understand this document for it to be engaging the budget process. As we said a while ago, the process is the planning and the formulation. That citizen got involved in the planning. There's a debate and approval. Very few countries in the world do citizens get involved in the parliamentary debate and approval. But certainly in the spending and the monitoring, all of those are doors of opportunity for the citizens, Doc. And so I think we need to define what we call engaging the budget. But one of the things that I haven't seen the IBP Open Budget Survey really addressing is the question of budget literacy. Until citizens really begin to understand the process of how the budget, those 4 stages operate, who the stakeholders are, because you need to know the people, behind those processes, then I don't think the level of engagement that we want to see is really going to happen. Budget literacy is key.
More on participation. So just remind us, Chevelle, of the 3 areas. What were about the scores in the 3 areas, the overall scores for transparency, participation, and oversight?
So for transparency, we got 50.
Right, and the maximum is 100, right?
Right, and for oversight, we were at 54. And for participation, we're at a very low 18 out of 100.
So that's a comparison I want to bring out. The participation scores are low, and when we have published this analysis in previous years, ourselves, CAPRI, and other commentators have challenged the Minister of Finance on that participation thing. And the minister does not agree that Jamaica should rank poorly on participation. And so I want to have the minister explain himself, the Minister of Finance explain himself, why is it that our participation score unfairly makes it look like we don't have participatory mechanisms. So let's go to that.
The more Jamaicans understand the budgetary process and budgets, the easier my job becomes. A big part of the problem is that there is a gulf in understanding, and therefore we don't really, the constraints are not evident, and the ministry has a very difficult challenge explaining why a particular course may be a better course than another one, because there's not a common understanding of what the constraints are. For example, so much of our budget is fixed. Is one of the challenges of being a developing country, that the degree of latitude that we have is less than other countries. Salaries are touching 300 billion, interest is 136 billion, amortization in any one year is 200 billion. They're up at 730 already, right? And those are fixed. There's no amount of participation that is really going to change any of those. And then pensions are 40 billion, that's fixed, right? So what's truly discretionary is a small amount, even at the national level. Now, the reason why I don't think we could, the national level is sort of out of bounds for some time to come, is that for you to have a participatory budget process at the national level, you'd have to have a national conversation, because it would be allocating funds nationally. So you wouldn't want just Kingston voices to be heard in that, nor would you only want Westmoreland voices to be heard. If you're talking about nationally, where should we put a bridge in the Yala St. Thomas, or should we put the bridge in St. Mary? You'd have to have everybody or representatives from everybody opine on that. And where's the best place for that? It's Parliament. We already have the system nationally, right? For you to replicate what Parliament does would be be redundant. And that's why the national level is probably not as appropriate, probably not as needed. What we need at the national level is better understanding of the national budget. At the local level, the opportunity exists because you can actually convene people in Clarendon to talk about whether or not, which drains need to be cleaned before the hurricane season. What should we do about students who can't afford university fees? How much should we set intervention at, et cetera, et cetera. There are local issues that we can gather people together realistically and convene a forum. Now, having said that, the way technology is going, it's certainly possible in the future that we could have, national consultations. Oh, I'm sorry about that. National consultations digitally, where you could be informed digitally. But again, I think, on a national level, you really encroaching on the space of Parliament there, and it begins to introduce deeper questions, more fundamental questions that probably this forum is not set up to address. So I think the appropriate place to be thinking about this, in my view, both from the point of view of the amount, the amount of our budget that's actually fixed, and the difficulties of convening a national conversation, and the competing with the role of Parliament. For those three reasons, I would think that the space for this kind of activity ought to be at the local level.
So there's a lot to unpack there, but there are two essential points that he's making as a rebuttal to this the argument that there's not enough room for participation. The first one he says is that most of the budget is predetermined. It's only about a fifth of the budget is discretionary. And secondly, Parliament is the forum for participation through their representatives. So let me have your reaction, then I come to you, Janet, and I have a couple of things to say.
Damien, when citizens are allowed to participate, they are assured that their concerns are considered, and then the government is better positioned to act in their best interest. Our neighbors not too far from us, the Damrep, they have since 2022, they have a system where they input the public's inputs are considered within their budget. And this is how they do it. Very simple. They have the municipal development councils who, unlike our parish council members who are apply for a job, they are selected by the public, and they have a list from the people. And what they do is that list passes on to the provincial development council, which is a local government. And in the local government, this is what they do. They meet, they look at the list, see what are the priorities. Is it good for GDP? Whatever is on the list, is it good for GDP? Will it boost the economy? What will it do for goods and services? What will it, they list them based on the ranking in terms of importance, and that they input from that into the budget. Very, very simple process, we can call it.
Excellent. Yeah. Janet, your response.
I agree, and there are several other countries. Brazil has been doing it, Uganda, Tanzania, New Zealand, Madrid in 2017 spent €1 million to enable the process of having citizens decide how to spend €100 million, but they thought that was value for money. So the minister said in the future, no, this has been happening for quite a long while in other jurisdictions. Jamaica just needs to look at it and determine what will work best for us here. But two quick points on the matter of the Constituency Development Fund. The minister did go on to mention, even in that very same webinar, I think, that Jamaicans have such a mechanism. The Constituency Development Fund is a $1.2 billion fund that says to every constituency, here we're allocating $20 million per year. You get to decide at the local government level how to utilize this. Now, one of the criticisms the minister has had, and maybe it's not fair to call it a criticism, is how many Jamaicans are taking up the offer at the local government level to engage, to participate. And since there are so few, and in a given year, is it really a true signal that Jamaicans are interested, or is it just the CAPRIs and the JAMP of this world. And so our message to citizens listening is, if you want to see public participation increase, let's take advantage of the mechanisms that exist now, such as the CDF, so that we can say to the minister, we're engaged and now we want to move it from the local to the central government level. But to the extent that the citizens aren't utilizing that, Damien, the minister does have a point as to whether there's really an interest.
Slido.com, go to Slido.com, put in the event code CAPRI, and answer our poll questions and participate in this discussion by asking your own questions or voting on the questions of others. From Slido, how can civil society organizations, this is for you, Janet, how can civil society organizations support efforts to improve openness? In other words, what can we do?
Right. Well, one of the things JAMP has done is to convert this huge budget of 700 pages on a simple digital tool that we call the National Budget Tool. That's on JAMP's website. I have to commend the ministry. Not only were we could always design and develop this tool, but the information had to be made accessible, right? Remember, we're talking about transparency by the Ministry of Finance. Now, what was amazing is that for the first time, the ministry has provided, certainly citizens, a level of detail, so much so, Damien, that you could go to our website and put in the word envelope, and it will tell you how much is being spent on envelopes. You could put in armored courier services, put in airplane tickets. So this is the first time that citizens can have that level of access to the details and therefore have a kind of conversation now with the government that you couldn't have before. So we're commending the Ministry of Finance while saying that that tool exists out of a citizens-based initiative. So that's one way in which civil society has done it. Another way is what I said before is budget literacy. Damien, it's really good to be here with you, because one of the things that really impacted me is when you had that halfway tree breakdown of the budget, and that was pre-JAMP days, but it left a lot of residue on me for the first time I was understanding things, and that left so much residue on a citizen that I moved it to another level. So JAMP is now providing workshops. We did 3 the other day, one with the youth, one with the Household Workers Union of Jamaica, one with the faith-based community. And I have one on record, a lady who's a helper saying, boy, them can't come talk to me again after this, you know. I was like, right, but what was she saying? She was saying, Miss Calder, how come nobody never taught us this before? So in short, our responsibility is to provide the tools that we can simplify and demystify it, but explain in simple language to citizens in a way that it becomes relevant to their lives today, why this is so important and how they can get involved. That's our job.
Let me move on to that missing document. You said that
Yes.
transparency has to do with these eight documents being
Yes.
available, freely available and
Yes.
accessible. And there is one that the
Not
Jamaican
produced.
government does not provide. So tell us again, what does that document cover? And why is it so important that the government make it publicly available?
So the pre-budget statement is that document, Damien. And the pre-budget statement should cover macroeconomic forecasts and the economic outlook for the country for the budget year to come, as well as 3 additional years. And the pre-budget statement should be available at least a month. This is the OBS standard, at least 1 month before the executive budget proposal, so that it can inform citizens. They have that information now that they can debate, have a public debate on matters before the final publication of the budget.
You know, what occurs to me as you mentioned that is that seen as governments have had to make a forecast for economic growth every single year before they do the budget, because the revenue depends upon what they expect the economy to do.
Yes.
And certainly everyone that I'm aware of, the government has overestimated economic growth in every single, not this government, you know, from as far back as I can remember. So if they made their assumptions explicit and published it in that document, the public would have a chance to say from long before the budget is formulated, that's not realistic.
Yes.
So if you're going to bring a budget based on that assumption that I think is not realistic, how credible is the budget?
Yes.
Slido.com, we have 2 poll questions. Please put in the event code CAPRI and answer our poll questions. We're going to come to the results shortly. The minister mentioned Chevelle that Parliament is the mechanism of participation. You know, citizens can participate through their representatives, and that debate takes place in Parliament. What is your reaction to it?
Definitely not. And
Well, that's pretty clear.
and persons need to have, it's not a formal mechanism, Damien. And that is what is scored in the open budget survey. There is no way to be assured that if I tell my MP something, that will be a part of the budget. There's nothing tangible, no document, nothing to say, okay, this is how it is inputted. And there's actually a question for that in the open budget survey. Is there a document that states how the government has taken these concerns of the citizen and inputted on a public participation? No formal mechanism, and it's not a formal way.
It also occurs to me, certainly from what we observe when parliamentary debates are televised, that it seems that the role of the representative sitting in Parliament is to represent the party in the debate and not really represent what is coming from his constituents, because you don't see much debate amongst the parliamentarians.
True.
It is more kind of in support of what you want to come in.
Yeah, I do, because that's one of the most striking things I heard a parliamentarian say to me once, Damon, is that I don't have enough power. You know? Say, you don't have enough power? But this is actually one of the areas where they themselves are experiencing frustration. So it should tell you, if a parliamentarian doesn't think they have voice in the process that we're discussing here, meaning if you are not in the cabinet of Jamaica, our parliamentarians think, Ms. Calder, we don't really have no say, you know, that budget set by the time it reached Standing Finance Committee. As a matter of fact, Standing Finance Committee is one of the first meetings. It's 63 MPs that should be in the House on that day. We call it a committee, Damon. So I used to think it was a small. No, it's every member of parliament would be showing up. When it starts, usually an hour late, you have about 16 people there. And the question is why? Their view is that they really don't have any say. Now, if a parliamentarian don't think that they have any say in that process, then how much more does the constituent feel that they have any say? So there's something about the system in terms of contribution and participation, not just public participation, but even MP participation that has to be looked at. And a great example is the Troy Bridge. It has taken that MP 3 years, but he started to make his voice heard in a Standing Finance Committee. 3 years later, the committee is getting the bridge. So it's not that it can't work, but there are no mechanisms for the voice of the parliamentarian to be easily heard, even in a debate and approval stage of the buses. And that says a lot, Dr. King.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The slider questions for the poll are, have you ever participated in any part of the budget process? And we want your opinions on that. The other question is, how likely are you to participate in future budget-related consultations if the opportunities were made available? We're going to come to the results shortly, so please go to slido.com and answer those questions. So you were one of the lead researchers on this, Chavella.
Yes, I was.
And you were new to this area of research.
Very new, yes.
So what I want to ask you is, what have you learned from conducting this research that you didn't understand before? What is the main thing that that you've learned from it and taken away from it?
The process. I've learned the process. I didn't know that there were 4 stages in the budget process. And I didn't even know where to find the budget documents. And I didn't know that they included even something that has to do with my parish, like, for example, a new road being built. I didn't know that I could look up the figures as a citizen of this country, as a young person. I didn't know that before conducting this research. And so it has taught me a lot.
So what that tells us is that, and I think this is actually one of the recommendations, that simply by publicizing what documents are available and what's in those documents would go a fair way into getting more participation, because people are just not aware of what is available and where they can get the information.
Definitely.
All right, let's see if we can take a look at the poll results and see if people have participated and if they would participate if they get the opportunity. How likely are you to participate in future budget-related consultations? 3/4 of the people watching
That's
this
great.
program are very likely to participate. I think that's very interesting.
That's wonderful.
And the other question, which showed up briefly and then disappeared, can we get back to it? Have you ever participated in any part of the budget process?
90%.
Yes, 90% of those.
I said no.
Of course, the persons who will be listening to this are the ones who will be most likely to have participated.
Yes.
So, there's a question on Slido that is saying, we do this analysis and we assess the government on how transparent, how participatory the process is, how much oversight there is. Like what happens now? Does the government care? And how do we push this forward? First from you.
Well, I would start off by saying yes. The Citizens Budget Guide is a significant step in the right direction of simplifying it. I would still say that citizens could pick up that budget guide and still go, huh? So there's still some more work to be done. I want to commend the government for the school budget tour that they have begun.
Yes.
This is the second year. They have visited, I think, about 20 schools this year. And of course, JAMP went knocking on the door. How can we help? And the ministry said, we'd love to have you. So, and this is the other thing, Dr. King, you don't wait. If you see your government doing something right, commend them for it and go forward and say, how can I help? I can do it as a citizen. That's how I started, inspired by some of the work you done. And now I'm doing it as an organization. So I think the government is moving in the right direction. They are standing still on some areas. They're moving on others. But here is my theory. If citizens started to lean in and show interest, I know we talk about this thing called government, but there are human beings behind it, Dr. King. And when they see people showing interest in what they do, wanting to understand it better, what do you think happens? Some change, some modification of behavior. So I would say we're going in the right direction. It's a question of the pace. And how can we pick it up? More citizens getting involved. Yeah.
And I agree with Janet. And this is a technological age. And so if we put things out there, like I said, on the Ministry of Finance's website, they have the budget is everybody's business. And that is so true. So if it is that we start disseminating information out there for the young people, this will take off, because it's like every little thing now that persons are interested in, which budget everybody's interested in, or your money, it will definitely take off, and it will have some effect, and everybody will begin to learn about, because all the young people, they're on their phone scrolling. So even if it is that they're scrolling, they see something about the budget that is appealing, or it will take off, and it will yes.
Excellent. Trevor Cornwall.
Thank you.
Research at CAPRI, thank you very much. Janet Calder.
It was a pleasure.
Executive Director of JAMP, thank you very much. We now go over to Naomi to take us out.
Today's discussion highlighted the critical roles accountability and transparency play in creating a more engaged citizenry and a more responsive government. It's clear that the openness of the budget process directly impacts our ability to analyze and influence how public resources are allocated. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to our presenter and panelists for their insightful contributions. A special thank you to our sponsor, the International Budget Partnership, and to the good corporate citizens who support CAPRI's work in the public interest throughout the year. The full report, Budget Scorecard 2024, is available on our website, www.capricaribbean.org. Lastly, be sure to keep an eye out for the dates of our next report launch, which will focus on the One City project. Thank you all for being a part of today's event.